All right, welcome everyone to our webinar about the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, also called ITEP. My name is Maggie Sherwinski, and today's webinar is hosted by the Active Transportation Alliance and the Illinois Public Health Institute in partnership with the Illinois Department of Transportation. And this is the first webinar in our three-part webinar series designed to help applicants across the state develop successful ITEP proposals for walking, biking, and trail projects. And today we'll be providing an introduction to ITEP. We'll be covering some of the grant basics and sharing what's new with the program this year, and also going over eligibility criteria and best practices for submitting a successful application. So with that, here are a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and we'll post it on the activetrans.org/ITEP website, and we'll also include a link to these slides. So you'll have all of these resources at your fingertips when you need them. If you do have any questions that come up during the webinar today, add those to the Q&A box, and then we'll address those questions with IDOT staff at the end of the webinar. And if you need closed captioning, that's available in the menu. So again, my name is Maggie Sherwinski. I'm the Director of Community Building and Leadership at the Active Transportation Alliance, and my colleague Jim Merrill is here. He's the Managing Director of Advocacy, and we'll be presenting today about ITEP. And if you're not familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit, and our mission is to advocate for walking, biking, and public transit to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. And we're very excited about ITEP and making sure more communities across the state get an opportunity to invest in active transportation. This webinar is possible through the Illinois State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program, also called iSpan, and this is a partnership with Illinois Public Health Institute, and it's funded by the Centers for Disease Control. And through it, we're offering this three-part ITEP webinar series, and the focus is on walking, biking, and trail infrastructure funding. And then new this year, we're also providing some additional one-on-one ITEP application support for 5 to 10 communities, which I'll talk about in a moment. But first, just save the date for the full webinar series. So today is part 1. Part 2 will be on August 21st, and we'll be walking you through the scoring criteria as well as what the application looks like. And then we'll try to devote at least half of the time to Q&A with IDOT staff. And then the third webinar will be devoted all solely to Q&A with IDOT staff, and that will be on September 11th. And as I mentioned, as part of the iSpan program, we're offering additional one-on-one support to 5 to 10 communities. So we'll review your narratives and provide feedback and offer other materials and resources. And you can apply for this by answering a few simple questions using either that QR code, or Kira will add a link to the chat. And if you're interested in this, you can apply. You have 2 weeks to apply by Wednesday, July 24th. And we will be prioritizing communities with lower staff capacity, lower resource capacity, as well as rural areas and disadvantaged areas. But definitely encourage you to apply if you're interested in this. So today we're going to start with some basics about ITEP, and then go into who is eligible for funding, what types of projects are eligible, and then focus on some best practices, tips on getting started, and tips from other applicants. And then we'll open it up to the questions from all of you with IDOT staff. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Jim, who's going to tell you a bit more about what ITEP is.
All right. Thank you, Maggie, and good morning, everyone. Once again, my name's Jim Merrill. I'm the Managing Director of Advocacy at Active Transportation Alliance. Really happy to be here with all of you this morning. So let's start from the top. What is ITEP? The Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program is a federally and state-funded program administered by the Illinois Department of Transportation, or IDOT. It's a really significant source of funding for walking, biking, and shared or multi-use path projects in our state. It has a 2-year funding cycle, so every 2 years on even numbered years, we have an application period come up. This year, we have application submittal period from August 1st until September 30th, 2024, so coming up beginning of next month. And there is $140 million available in federal and state funding. Next slide, thanks. So this year, with ITEP in its 16th cycle, $140 million in, as I mentioned, state and federal funding is available. And 40 million of that comes from the federal government as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the remaining 100 million comes from state funding via Rebuild Illinois, which established annual dedicated funding started in 2019 for walking, biking, and trail projects, which we're super excited about. And the goal of the program is to allocate resources to well-planned projects that provide and support alternative modes of transportation and improve quality of life for residents throughout Illinois. So we're going to get a little bit more into that. Last cycle in 2022, just so you get a kind of sense of the size of the program and the scale, there were 213 applications. 73 projects were awarded funding for a total of $129 million in awarded funding. And the average funding amount was about $1.76 million per project. Past ITEP projects that we've seen get funded, there's a variety of projects, and we're going to get a lot into this, but we've seen in Batavia, the Route 31 road diet. Rockford had buffered multi-use path and on-street bike lanes. St. Elmo sidewalk improvement project. Roselle did a multi-use path and pedestrian bridge. Des Plaines S-curve pedestrian and bicyclist underpass, another exciting project. So all kinds of things are getting done around the state through ITEP. So we're so excited to be here to talk to you about it. Go to the next slide, please. Here are some helpful resources. The I.ITEP website, it has all of the detailed ITEP guidelines, the application portal itself, as well as the IDOT and GATA pre-award requirements. So making sure you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed in order to be able to apply for the program. And then, as Maggie already mentioned, there's a really fantastic ITEP resource page on the Active Transportation Alliance website. There you can find recordings from past ITEP webinars, and this recording will be featured there, as well as some frequently asked questions, other relevant documents, and that's all at activetrans.org/ITEP. Go to the next slide. Thanks. So we're going to be going through a lot of acronyms and throwing around a lot of language and jargon here, some of which maybe you are very familiar with, some of which maybe perhaps you're not. So one of the resources on that activetrans.org/ITEP website is this handy list of acronyms, including some important ones like your Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Transportation Improvement Program, Phase 1 and Phase 2 engineering, all that kind of stuff. So as we're going through, I would recommend pulling up that website and keeping it handy so you can reference this list as we go forward. And I think I'm handing it back to Maggie now.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. All right, so here are a few additional basics about the program. So the ITEP funds 9 different categories, and today's webinar is focused on these first 2 categories, A and B. So bicycle and pedestrian facilities and rail to trail projects. These are the 2 categories that can receive the ITEP state funding, so the others do not. So that means that these 2 categories receive that $100 million, which is the majority of available funding. So if you are applying for funding in one of these 2 categories, you'll have a greater chance of being awarded ITEP funds. And what is new this year? So really not much has changed between the last cycle in 2022 and this year, 2024. There are updated ITEP guidelines, which you can find on the IDOT website. And then there also are some new pre-award requirements that we will go over towards the end of the webinar today. And if you need it, we just wanted to include the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity numbers that are new this year, and we'll be sure to include that on our the activetrans.org/ITEP website as well. All right, a few key points. So projects must connect or enhance the existing transportation system for people walking, biking, or rolling. And it's important to think about how your project can help connect people to destinations. The maximum award amount is again $3 million per project. And this is a reimbursable grant program. So what that means in a little more detail is project sponsors must pay initial costs for preliminary engineering, so phase 1, phase 2 engineering, for land acquisition or utility relocation upfront, and then will be reimbursed by IDOT as you submit the paperwork documenting implementation. Construction is a different story. So either IDOT or the project sponsor can pay for construction costs. So if you select to have IDOT do construction letting, which is often preferred, IDOT would pay for upfront construction costs. And more details about all of this are again on the ITEP guidelines, which is a very helpful resource. Encourage you all to look at that. And also there's more detail about that on the ATA FAQ on the ActiveTrans website. So a few things that you can't do with ITEP. So projects cannot be solely for recreational use. And the example we often like to give is a loop trail within a park. So that would be ineligible because it doesn't provide transportation from one destination to another. And then projects also cannot be for routine maintenance. So that means no restriping of a trail or bike lane or cleaning up debris or repairing a sidewalk or a broken curb. So those would be ineligible project examples. The application will ask you to list a project sponsor and an applicant. So we just wanted to make sure you understand the difference between the two. So a project sponsor, so this is an eligible entity with taxing authority that can guarantee matching funds to carry out the proposed project. So for example, that's often a municipality. So that the project sponsor must be authorized through sam.gov to accept a federal grant. You'll need to show proof of an active UEI, which stands for the Unique Entity ID, which was formerly called the DUNS number. As far as the applicant goes, that can be anyone. It can be any representative who completes the ITEP application on behalf of the sponsor. So this representative will be the primary point of contact for all communication with IDOT relating to the application. And the project sponsor and applicant can actually be the same person or they can be different people. So this is up to you, but just wanted to need to make sure you list someone for each of those categories in your application. So who is eligible as a sponsor? The project sponsor must be a local taxing authority. This could be a local government or municipality, transit authority or agency, natural resource or public land agency, such as a forest preserve or park district, a school district or a school, tribal governments, nonprofits, MPOs with a population of under 200,000, IDOT at the request of an eligible entity, or other local or regional governments with oversight of transportation. And then what costs are covered? ITEP, the ITEP grant will provide reimbursement of up to 80% for preliminary engineering. So that could be phase 1 engineering, phase 2 engineering, as well as utility relocations, pedestrian lighting, construction engineering, or construction. The grant also can provide up to 50% match for right-of-way, for easements, or for street lighting. And I just wanted to highlight that with the lighting, there is a difference between street lighting, which is the 50-50 match, and pedestrian lighting, which is, or bicycle lighting, which is an 80-20 match. So the required match is the responsibility of the project sponsor, unless you qualify for state matching funds based on high need criteria, which we'll discuss in a moment. But wanted to just highlight a note about preliminary engineering. So while this grant can and has helped communities cover phase one engineering in the past, your application will score higher if phase one is already completed or if it's underway. So, and if that's not possible, if you do plan to apply for phase one engineering, it's recommended that you bundle it with phase two engineering, and even better, bundle that with construction costs. So that will help you score better. So just a tip as you're kind of figuring out what you're going to be applying for. And then this is a note more for engineers, public works, or consulting firms on the call today. So just a note about project costs and kind of what you need to be thinking about. So for combined engineering costs, phase one engineering, phase two engineering, and construction engineering, that cannot exceed 30% of the estimated total project costs. Construction engineering can't exceed 15% of the total construction costs, and utility relocation can't exceed 50% of the total construction costs. So just a note for you that are dealing with the budgeting. And also a note for you regarding, so you have an understanding of how long you have to complete a project. For preliminary engineering projects, that work has to be completed in 4 years after you receive your award notification letter. For engineering construction projects, that money needs to be obligated in 4 years from receiving your letter. And then the full project has to be completed within 10 years from that letter, or funds could be rescinded. And again, check those ITEP guidelines if you have questions about that, or you can also reach out to ITEP or IDOT directly. For the local match, so the ITEP guidelines have a list of eligible sources that can be used. If you're looking at federal funds for your local match, they need to be non-transportation related. And then the rest of the funds on this list are state and local funding possibilities. So this includes IDNR grants, community block grants, local tax funds, or donations. And you should definitely, if you're not sure if a certain source will qualify, contact your IDOT district's ITEP coordinator for additional details, and they'll help clarify all of that for you. So at least 25% of the total state funding will be directed towards projects in high need communities. So after the winning projects are selected, a local match is calculated for all of the projects using a sliding scale. And so for those communities that qualify for local match assistance, you could receive 50% or half of the local match funding. So that means that your community would pay the 10% local match instead of 20%. Or you could receive 100% assistance, which means that you would pay no local match, which is definitely very exciting that this exists in our state, because it's, I think Illinois was one of the first states to do this. Oh, and also a note, sorry, I want to back up, that local match assistance would also apply to the right-of-way or easement purchases or the lighting, which would normally require the 50-50 match. So the community score mapping tool, your local match is determined using this tool, which is available on IDOT's online application portal. And what you'll do is you'll draw the location of your project on this interactive map, and a community score will be calculated for you. That score is based on 4 factors at the census level. It looks at a half mile surrounding, at census tracts surrounding your project, and it's using 2020 census data. So each project so there are four factors that determine your score. So each of these factors is given a different weight by IDOT. It will look at community size, property tax per capita, percent below poverty, median household income. And again, this is on a census tract level. The last two, the poverty level and the median income, those are given the highest weight. But you'll get a score. And that, if you change the location of your project, you'll get a different score. So you could try out drawing different possible projects using IDOT's tool to see what project receives the highest community score if you wanted. So just a little bit more about the scoring. So there are 2 scores. There's this application score, which is based on the merits of your project, and it uses set criteria, and we'll be reviewing that in more detail at the second webinar on August 21st. And that particular score is out of 100 points. And then there's also this community score, so they're separate. This community score is, again, calculated using that community mapping tool, and it will ensure that 25% of funds go to qualifying proposals in the highest need communities. And it will be used to determine that local match assistance. So you won't know if you qualify for a reduced local match until awards are announced, because it depends on who else applies. However, to give you a better sense of where communities fell during the last cycle in 2022, this is what the range was. So if a project received a community score of under 40, then no local match assistance was given, and the sponsor had to pay the full local match, so that 20% local match. Projects that received a community score between 40 and 55 paid half the local match, so they paid 10%. And then projects with a score of 56 or higher received full local match assistance, so they pay no local match. And again, this isn't a set range. This is what we saw in 2022. And this year it will depend on the applicant pool, but still we think that this could give you kind of a sense of where you might fall. All right, so funding eligibility, and I'm going to pass it back to Jim to go over what types of projects are eligible.
All right, thank you, Maggie. So first we're going to start with some kind of general eligibility requirements. So as the T in ITEP indicates, transportation is key to the whole shebang. So your project should be connecting people to destinations and serve a transportation need for people walking, biking, or rolling. So asking yourself questions like, does my project help people reach jobs, healthcare, businesses, schools, or shopping centers, those kinds of destinations? How is your project improving the community's connectivity and accessibility overall? Another kind of key general requirement is ideally your plan has been identified, your project has been identified in a plan. So the inclusion in a plan really helps demonstrate that the project was vetted by community and aligns with the community's needs and other planning efforts that are going on. And if a project cannot specifically be found in a plan, you can instead show there's a goal, need, or intention stated in an established local or regional plan to improve walking and biking. So that could be an alternative pathway. The project must be constructed in reasonable, usable segments and provide a logical start and end. So really thinking about connectivity and, again, the transportation focus of the program. ADA and design requirements must be met. You need to be also thinking about safety and accessibility as you put your project scope together. So things like pedestrian and bicycle signals, traffic calming techniques, lighting, and other safety related accommodations. If we go to the next slide, please. So looking a bit at pedestrian and bicycle facilities, eligible project element, thinking about sidewalks. installing new sidewalks or replacing existing sidewalks with ADA compliant ones. ADA must be addressed on any corner that has or will have a sidewalk. And so typically all four corners, but it's also more related to whether or not there will be a sidewalk. We'll probably answer more questions about that later. Consider things like adding traffic calming to your project, and really thinking about how is this enhancing the transportation experience for people walking, biking, or rolling. It does not include repairing broken or cracked sidewalks. Maintenance and repair are ineligible. So some more things, pedestrian improvements, things like pedestrian crossings, or refuge islands, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which there's a picture of right here, and crosswalks. These cannot be kind of standalone projects. They really need to, and they have to include curb ramps and sidewalks. So really thinking about, again, how do these elements connect to a broader plan or project and create connectivity. Pedestrian signals such as countdown timers or audible signals, and pedestrian lighting is also eligible. But again, thinking about how does this enhance the overall transportation environment? So thinking about things like, how can you justify pedestrian lighting by showing people are using the space at night through, surveys or other observations, things like that. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Whoops, go back one, I think. All right. Oh no, are we good? Sorry, my bad. So going to bikeways, thinking about these types of eligible project elements, things like bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, protected bike lanes, bike routes, multi-use paths. It can fund things like green paint, and trails must be multi-use and have durable materials such as asphalt. So that's an important thing to realize. Again, kind of getting at the transportation goal of the project, making sure that it's using materials that are facilitating transportation through different kinds of weather, as we can see here. Right. Another eligible project elements, one of my favorites, road diets or right sizing of roads. So ITEP will fund the design and construction of a road diet meant to accommodate bikes and pedestrians. So this could mean, removing parking areas and restriping to add space for people walking and biking. And it can include other traffic calming improvements like islands or bump outs or crosswalks. And while the bike lane or pedestrian space would be eligible for ITEP funding, the roadwork itself would not be eligible and require a different funding source. So roadway resurfacing, not an eligible element. Other bike ped facilities that we can look at including in these ITEP projects, pedestrian and bicycle structures crossing rivers or railroads and roadways, those barriers to connectivity. Some additional amenities like bicycle lockers or racks, although again, not in a standalone project, thinking about how does this fit into a broader transportation plan or address that transportation need. Pedestrian and bike path lighting, but similar to the pedestrian lighting, you need to be able to demonstrate, there's a need, and there are people who are, riding on the paths or using it for transportation purpose at night. So that's something to think about if you include those elements in your project. And then other kinds of elements and facilities that are eligible, things like directional and regulatory signs or wayfinding, landscaping, planting trees or shrubs as part of a larger project. Permanent benches, they must meet the criteria of permanent in nature, must be built in, bolted or anchored down. So, robust benches required. Utility relocation, Include any costs covered in an existing utility agreement in your application for relocation of power lines, cell phone lines, gas lines, and other utilities affected by the ITEP project. So it's important to make sure that you're accounting for those existing utility agreements in your application and your costs. And it can't be the major element of a project, so it can't exceed 50% of the construction costs. So need to make sure that you're taking on a project that doesn't have more than 50% construction for utility relocation. And finally, fencing to address significant safety issues. All right, now to talk about ineligible project elements. So we talked about road work and resurfacing, parking lots or spaces or striping for cars, trucks, or buses. Recreational trails, so like a loop within a park that does not connect, destinations or serve a transportation function would be ineligible, as would other recreational park facilities, playgrounds, or campgrounds, or picnic areas. Again, the transportation focus. You can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide. Oh, you can go to the next slide. Oh,
Jim, they're out there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Equestrian or snowmobile trails. So not all types of transportation. Sorry, snowmobilers and people who like to ride horses. Picnic or bus or bike shelters. So again, those different recreational elements. Trash receptacles, routine maintenance and operations, or trail resurfacing or maintenance. So I know there were some questions already, which we'll get to later about trail repairs. Other ineligible project elements include state or metropolitan planning, organization, administrative costs, promotional activities, safety or educational activities, feasibility and planning studies, and any work performed before FHWA authorization. Moving to Rails to Trails projects, some of my personal favorites out there. Things that are eligible on this front to be thinking about if you have a rail trail project that you're looking to fund through ITEP. Planning, design, and construction of multi-use trails along a railroad right-of-way. It can also support the purchase of right-of-way and unused railroad property for future bike pedestrian trails. But again, that's ineligible as a standalone project. So you can acquire abandoned railroad corridors or property as part of a broader project. Funds can also be used for transactional costs, including appraisals, surveys, and legal costs. So important to know with those railroad projects. Next slide. And things to be thinking about if you are, again, considering a rail to trail project through ITEP, must provide a mode of transportation for people to travel destinations. So again, don't forget about the T in ITEP. The trail must be built within 10 years. And any projects involving railroads requires a lot of work with the railroad. And it could also include engaging with the Illinois Commerce Commission. So it's important that folks are aware of this, the level of coordination needed. And if you are looking to have a rail to trail project, you're encouraged to have a plan or at least be farther along with that coordination. The farther along you are and with that coordination is going to be better in terms of the project selection score and the project readiness category. So it's good to demonstrate that you are aware of the time and energy it takes to coordinate with the railroads. All right, and I am handing it back to Maggie.
All right, thanks, Jim. All right, so now, while we know the grant doesn't open till August 1st, you have a couple weeks now that you can get started. So we definitely recommend getting started now because there are a lot of moving parts and you're depending on other people. So the sooner you can, get things rolling, the better. And so we'll go over each of these things, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention, if you do have questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat. We'll be going through that Q&A box first, and your question might get lost in the chat. But we'll try to look at both, but please use the Q&A box if you can. All right, so first, we were, how do you select a competitive project? So here are a few recommendations based on some conversations we've had with IDOT. So one is IDOT recommends going big. So, as going off what Jim said, don't forget about the E in ITEP, the enhancement. So every letter in ITEP is important to think about. So if you have, for example, if you're a project, you want to build a mile of sidewalk or a mile of a bike lane, think about other project elements you could be adding to that project. So thinking about the intersection and the traffic calming. And another example, say you have in your community, there's a 2-mile stretch of sidewalk, and there's a lot of gaps. It's maybe 50 or 60% complete. So instead of applying to just fill in the sidewalk gaps, why not replace that entire stretch with an 8-foot multi-use path, and then you can also improve the intersections with curb ramps or bump outs or pedestrian islands. So again, think big, dream big, and really, if you can create a project that is accommodating both bicyclists and pedestrians, that will only help your score. Second is, as we've been reiterating, it's important to connect to destinations. So as many destinations as you can. A project that connects a residential area to a forest preserve or a park when it scores, as well as a project that connects that residential area to a forest preserve, as well as to a school and a grocery store. So if you can expand your project to connect to more destinations, that's a good thing. Third, think about the network you're creating by connecting to other facilities, whether that's other sidewalks or bike lanes, side paths, trails, or a bus or train line. So think about the big picture, think regionally. Can the project span community boundaries, or can it connect to the regional transportation system? And then finally, think about selecting a project that can improve safety for people walking and biking, or our most vulnerable road users. Are there areas in your community that are dangerous for people walking and biking? Maybe areas where people don't walk or bike because they don't feel comfortable. So really think about areas needing improved safety. Those are great areas to think about for an ITEP application. And then also along with that, think about how can you show this to IDOT in your applications. You're going to want to provide details, whether that's crash data, survey data, walk audit. So just think about how can you make the case. And then here are just a handful of questions that you might ask yourself if you're kind of struggling, like, oh, where do we start? What projects should we select? So, is there a walking and biking transportation need in your community? Have you collected any input from the community? I think often the community does have a lot of ideas if you listen. Are there any existing plans that can help you identify potential projects? So think about, does the area have a pedestrian bicycle plan? Is there a comprehensive plan? Is there a downtown development plan or a corridor plan? And then you can also think about county plans, MPO plans, state plans to help you look at possible projects. Do any projects have a regional focus? Again, could you partner with a neighbor, which would then help you reach a larger audience and also help your score? Do any projects benefit disadvantaged populations in your community? Is the project something the community wants? Are there any shovel-ready projects? So, projects that have phase 1 engineering completed, or underway, as well as if you need right-of-way acquisition, is that underway, that can help your score. And then are there any past ITEP applications where you weren't successful, or maybe even looking at safe routes to school grants or other bike ped grant applications? Can any improvements be made? And we always recommend reaching out. You can reach out to IDOT staff to get their thoughts about, like, does this project have potential? Like, what can we do differently? And then finally, just thinking about, can different project elements be combined into one application? So, again, thinking about walking, biking, and intersections, like add in as many elements as you can and make it an enhancement, a true enhancement project. And then also, does your project reach multiple destinations? So the more destinations you can help people reach, the better. All right, so point 2 is making sure you know who your key contacts are at the state and MPO level. From IDOT, if your project ends up being on a state road or intersects a state road, you'll need a letter of allowance from IDOT. So IDOT can also help fine tune your project scope, answer any grant applications. So it's better to be in touch with IDOT sooner rather than later and before you submit your grants. I think that'll probably help you create a more quality, successful application. And then if you are in a metropolitan planning organization or a regional planning commission, you'll want to be reaching out to them as well, because you'll need to get a letter of support from them. If you happen to be in the Chicagoland region area, just a note for you, you should go to your Council of Government or Council of Mayor for that letter of support rather than CMAP. And then if you are awarded funding for anyone in an MPO or RPC, you need to get that project then included in the Transportation Improvement Program, so the TIP. If you're not in an MPO or RPC, you can disregard all of what I just said. And if you're trying to find out, like, who is my district ITEP coordinator, there is a list right here on the slide with phone numbers, so you can reach out to them before the grant opens on August 1st. That list is also on IDOT's ITEP website, as well as the ITEP guidelines. So you can, that person will then help direct you to the right person in your district, depending on what your needs are. And then if you want to be in touch with IDOT's ITEP grant team, you can email dot.itep@illinois.gov. All right, so third, you're going to need to adopt a resolution. And again, this can take some time. So this is one of those things that we recommend getting started with early. So, once you've selected your project, so that resolution of financial commitment from the project's sponsor would commit to the local funding requirements to complete the project. And you can visit IDOT's webpage or the Active Trans ITEP page to view an example resolution, which I think should help you easily put it together. So you just need to get the process started of getting city or village approval. And then another thing that can take some time that past applicants have said, get started on this early, is that you need a detailed cost estimate for your project, and this must be prepared by a professional engineer or engineering firm with that knowledge and expertise on this type of work. There is a sample cost estimate spreadsheet available. It's the BDE 213 form. It's on IDOT's web page as well as the Active Trans page. So basically, you don't have to use that spreadsheet, but it's a possible template you can use. But you'll need to include information about the items you need, the units of measure, the quantity, the unit cost, and the total cost. And then we also just wanted to mention the Active Transportation Alliance has put together a list of engineering firms who are able to offer some pro bono support for higher need, low capacity communities in need of assistance for creating a detailed cost estimate like this. So say you don't have your own engineers or you don't have a consulting firm. So please note though that providing that pro bono support does not guarantee a firm will be selected for paid work. They still must go through the quality-based selection process. But we just wanted to make sure this was, just wanted to note that for those communities that need that additional support. Another thing you get started on right now is collecting letters of support. Those, you want to involve your community in this project, and that support can show IDOT that this is a project the community wants. So thinking about who you might reach out to. So any agency impacted by the project, like a railroad, utility company, as well as community groups that might benefit from the project, like citizens, advocacy groups, community groups, health departments, schools, businesses. Providing those groups with a letter of support template can really help them out. But usually they're going to need some lead time to get back a letter to you for your project. So get started on this as soon as you have your project selected. And then if you are, wanted to reiterate this, if you're in an MPO or RPC, you need to contact them to let them know that you're applying for ITEP and ask for a letter of support from them. And then finally, it helps to show that the public has been involved in other ways other than just the letter of support. So if you can collect any information through public meetings, through comments, through surveys, maybe through a walk audit, that can also be very helpful for your application. And then fifth here, so this is what's a little different this year. So there are a few IDOT pre-award requirements. So you need to show that you have that active unique entity identifier that you can get through the sam.gov website. And if you don't know how that works, IDOT has a helpful GATA guide for grantees that can walk you through how to do that. A few other requirements. So local public agencies must also complete a few other forms. So I don't know if you say BOBS, but the BOBS 2831 conflict of interest form, the BOBS 2835 risk assessment form, and then the programmatic risk assessment form. So that is for local public agencies. And then also if we mentioned this earlier, but if your project is on a state route or intersects a state route, you need that IDOT allowance letter that you can, it's great to get started on that sooner rather than later. For GATA, the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act requirements. So this is welcome news. We hope to a lot of people on this webinar, but local public agencies are now exempt from GATA. So that would be municipalities. Don't need to fill out the typical GATA forms, and you can check the ITEP guidelines if you don't believe me, or if you just want to see more details. So just to confirm that you're okay, this is what's required. There are a few sponsors that do need to fill out GATA forms. So they're non-exempt. So this would include universities and colleges, state agencies, and non-for-profits. And the forms that you'll need to fill out are the GATA uniform grant application, the uniform budget, and the ICQ forms. And again, there's a helpful guide, IDOT GATA guide for grantees that has instructions and information on all of this. And you can also email dot.gata@illinois.gov if you have questions about GATA. Okay, we're almost done, and then we'll get to the Q&A. A few additional tips from past applicants. Start seeking out potential local matching funds now, and really it helps to get started on demonstrating that community support. Organize a meeting, start collecting letters of support. There's a great online walk audit tool called Project Sidewalk, where you can get community members involved in finding out where the issues are in your community. And again, dream big. Think about the E in ITEP, enhance. How can you enhance the active transportation network in your community? Think about how are you going to be crafting your needs statement. So how can you make the case? Why is this problem unique? How will your project solve that problem? What connections will your project create? And then think about, again, making the case, collecting collateral data, whether that's safety data, health data, air quality data that can really help showcase why your community needs that funding. And a few other tips. I think the big tip everyone says is start early. Like you just don't realize. I mean, everyone has a lot on their plate, and you don't realize how quickly 2 months can go by. So the deadline is September 30th. So right now you have about 2.5 months to get your application ready. The recommendations are meet with your local leaders early to get that resolution in the works. Start collecting those letters of support. Get started on that project cost estimate because that can take time. Give yourself some internal deadlines. I feel like the grant or the webinar series can maybe help you set some deadlines. So August 21st is the next webinar, and we're going to be devoting a lot of that time to Q&A with IDOT. So if you can get a lot done, you'll be able to utilize that session and get some specific questions answered from IDOT on August 21st. So and just a few other tips. Know your project scope up front that can help you with your application. Use a professional engineer for your cost estimate so you know that it's done correctly and accurately. If possible, get that phase 1 engineering underway that can only help your score, and then communicate with ITEP staff. They are here to help. They want to help. And then just wanted to mention this again, and Kira will add this to the chat, but as part of iSpan, we're offering that additional application support to 5 to 10 communities. So you can fill out, just a few questions about, what kind of support or about your community, and we'll be providing that support to review your application and provide some feedback. And again, that application is due July 24th. And with that, let's open it up to questions. So I'm actually gonna stop sharing here. I can get started. Just need to find the Q&A box. Okay. And Jim and I will alternate asking questions for IDOT staff. So that would be John and Lita. So what do we have here? So we have a question about does funding only apply to FAU routes? Federal aid routes? Is that what that is, I believe?
Yes. No, it does not apply only to FAU routes. Just be careful though. Remember that roadway work, if that's what you're referring to, is not eligible.
Great, thanks.
All right. The next question from Melissa. What about major repairs to an already existing rails to trails project, like a major bridge repair or replacement?
That would be eligible. We just sometimes there's a fine line between what would be considered maintenance and what would not be considered maintenance. So if it's major repairs, major replacement, absolutely. Repairs, just make sure it's not maintenance.
All right, great. Okay, next question is, someone said, I noticed ITEP funding previously did not include bike share as an eligible cost. In the new NOFO, no language specific to bike shares in eligibility was included. So wanted to confirm if bike share like equipment, bike charging stations, etc., can be included.
Bike share is not eligible.
All right.
So the next question is about lighting. And I know we talked a bit about how kind of demonstrating the need for lighting is important, but this question is lighting required as part of a multi-use path?
It's not necessarily required, but I would certainly, if I were you, I would really consider who's using the path. Obviously, at what times. If, for instance, you have a path that's between a neighborhood or a community and a school, consider that a lot of school activities happen at night. And so you may have kids, students using that. So you would certainly want to consider lighting.
Right. Next question is if railroad right-of-way purchase, I guess, is needed to complete two separate segments, is that eligible or is that considered a standalone project?
If it's just the right of way, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Brian, if you can add additional details about that question to the Q&A
Yeah.
box, we can get back to that. All right. I'll do the next question. So would you please, we can add they want the link to the community score mapping tool. So that is on, if you go to the ITEP website, which is in the chat link, you need to, I guess, log in or create a login to the application portal. And from there, that's where you can see that community score mapping tool. So we can't throw up the actual community score mapping tool link, I believe, but once you get into the application portal, you can see that.
All right. Question about is the $3 million cap for the total project or just the grant cap? Clarification.
3 million is the total amount of any award. So yeah, you could have a $12 million project, but you're only going to be able to receive $3 million of ITEP funds towards that project. And especially when I would want to say too, when you're talking about larger projects like that, make sure that you are considering the sunset clauses too. That 3 million needs to be obligated within 4 years of the awards notification. Sometimes with larger projects, it takes a little longer to get things moving.
All right, there's actually another question about the sunset clause. For phase 1, does all work completed in 4 years mean construction too?
Oh no, that would only apply to projects that are awarded only for PE.
Okay.
I think that's what the question was. I happened to see that too.
Next question. If our municipality has a current ongoing ITEP project from our previous call or application, can we still apply for a new project this year?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Next question is how would a project that includes downtown streetscape and a shared use path be considered? Because it has some streetscape, would it automatically fall in the $40 million federal pot, potentially hurting the chance for funding?
Very good question. Okay, first of all, I would want to say that just because it would or could any project fall into the $40 million federal pot, which means it would not be eligible for state funding, does not hurt the chances for funding. We don't separate applications before we do the reviewing and scoring. Each application is reviewed and scored on its own merits. So, just because you're a streetscape project doesn't mean you have a less chance of being funded than a bike ped project. But what I would say is this is something you need to be careful about. We've had several cases where, for instance, sidewalks in front of downtown buildings. Say you've got a 12-foot sidewalk in front of a downtown building. We want to redo all this sidewalk. Great. That does not necessarily make it a bike ped trail just because it's 12 foot wide and it would meet that criteria. We would probably still consider that a streetscape project. So if you have something like that, probably the best thing to do is to contact us, and we might be able to help you determine which would be the best category to submit that under. It comes up fairly often.
All right. It's good to get a good one in there. I feel like maybe we've touched on this a little bit. Outside of ped bike facilities, if the route is a local non-federal aid route, will the work not be eligible to receive the federal portion of ITEP funding? I think we said that it didn't matter,
Right.
but
Yep, it does not matter.
All right, next question is the proof of the UEI, what is it, the Unified, I don't even remember what it stands for. The UEI, just the actual number, or is it something more than that?
No, that's it. We just need to know that you have a number.
Okay.
well, I like this question. Is there a limit on the number of letters of support?
No.
Theoretical.
I'll say that hesitantly. I mean, we don't maybe want like 3,000 letters or anything like that, but we won't be able to read them all. But no, there's not. We do need to be careful about the amount of space, though. I think it's. Oh, Yulita may have to jump in here. The amount of space that attachments can be, the size of attachments.
I think it's 35 megabytes.
35 megabytes, I think. Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right, next question is, we have a well-used bike path adjacent to a creek where the retaining wall is falling. Would this project be eligible? It's a major north-south route, connects residents, commercial park district facilities.
Well-used bike path adjacent to a creek where the retaining wall is failing. That sounds like a safety issue. So that's how I would probably approach it. Just on that little bit of information, and it would be eligible, of course.
All right.
Can a municipality submit for more than one project?
Yes.
Can ineligible elements be done of combined with, wait, hold on. Can ineligible elements be done of combined with eligible elements? Oh, can you combine ineligible and eligible elements into your project?
Yes, but we will not pay for the ineligible ones.
And I think you would just list that out in that cost estimate, right? Like what's eligible and what's ineligible.
Right. And it's one thing to, kind of keep in mind too, projects that are awarded, one of the first things you'll be directed to do is to have a kickoff meeting with our local IDOT district personnel and FHWA. And at that point, one of the things that will be discussed is the estimate of cost, the detailed cost estimate, and they'll kind of go through those things and start pulling out, I'm not sure this one's eligible. This one, even though you thought it was, it might not be. But yeah, but yeah, they can certainly be in the same project.
All right, we have a question on sidewalks. I think the answer is yes again, but is replacing sidewalks that are in very poor condition an eligible project?
Replacement, yes. Maintenance, no.
Right. And John, I think you've said before, like with it, like if you can, like if it's a 4-foot sidewalk, replace it with a 5-foot sidewalk, like make it better if you can,
Absolutely.
your space.
Of course. Yeah, and that's something else you need to think about. And if you have 4-foot sidewalks and they're really cracked and broken and you need to be replacing them, that we will probably tell you it has to be a 5-foot sidewalk or whatever our local roads engineers will tell you. We do have certain criteria that has to be met.
Got it. All right. Next question is, does all land need to be annexed into city limits for a new path to connect Hospital Plaza and historic low-income neighborhood?
That is a good question. That is one that you probably need to talk to us about
All right.
to see exactly what's going on.
So Bobby, reach out to IDOT about that.
Got a stumper.
Nah, there's no stumpers.
Or just the more one to dig into.
Yeah.
That's great. So here's another one. Sorry, this is jumping around. Considering we are not sure about the scoring criteria, can a municipality submit 2 applications, understanding only one may be awarded? I think we covered that already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is a road diet question. If a dual direction separated bike lane is incorporated with a road diet, so a 4-lane to 3-lane with bike lanes to connect bikeways, and traffic signals with bike signals are needed to enhance non-motorized use or safety, could signals be cost shared?
That sounds very specific. I would reach out to the local IDOT district to ask that question, because I'm not sure I absolutely understand the question. Yeah, I would reach out to the local IDOT district.
And John, are like just somewhat related, are bike signals, traffic bike signals, an allowable ITEP expense?
Not standalone, no.
Okay, but they could be part of a larger project.
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly. Additions or improvements to existing traffic signals are definitely eligible. New traffic signals might be.
Okay.
We have to determine if they would be absolutely necessary and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
All right. Next question is about trail projects and right-of-way acquisition, which I know always gets very interesting very quickly. So Brian shares that 2 disconnected segments of a greater regional trail currently require diversion onto local roads. Communities want to acquire railroad right-of-way to build those remaining sections. Would acquisition of those parcels, followed by construction of the missing trail segments to create a single unified regional trail, be considered a standalone because of the parcel by parcel basis? Or would it constitute a whole project? So I guess it's kind of like, where's the line between a standalone versus a whole project on the right-of-way acquisition?
Would acquisition of those parcels followed by construction? I mean, that sounds like it's one big project.
Yeah.
So that would be fine. That would be fine. One thing just want to make clear though is, and this is when we start talking about what makes a good project, and Maggie and Jim went through some things that are really, really good. Probably one of the biggest things is project readiness. And I've seen a couple questions here about railroads. Railroad acquisition takes a long time. So just be prepared. That is one of the things that we will certainly look at. So, you know, any communication, any negotiation, anything you've already started with the railroad, you definitely want to make sure that's addressed in your application. That will be better. That will give you a better score. So, in questions like that, like the one that Jim just asked, you need to talk to us. Come talk to us about that. Just so that so that we have a good idea of where you're at. Sometimes, and I don't want to discourage anybody for sure, absolutely, especially this early. But you know, sometimes we have gone back before and talked to people and said you're probably better waiting until the next funding cycle to give you some time to actually get some of this stuff going. Railroads can be tricky. So just, you know, I would talk to us as soon as possible and let us know what's going on. And then we can help direct some of those railroad questions.
All right, great, John, thanks. All right, next question is, our proposed project is a multi-use path that connects the downtown and an industrial park and commuter parking lot, but also encircles the property. Are both sections of pathway eligible for the project or just the pathway that connected the downtown to the industrial park commuter lot?
I would say both sections without actually seeing it mapped out. But just off the top of my head, I would say both would be eligible.
All right.
And Amy is asking to circle back to the lighting question. Will an application be stronger if it includes safety-related accommodations? And specifically, they're referring to page 13 of the guidelines, B 3.1. The language in this section is projects under this category must. So I guess that's the question.
I would have to look at the guidelines. But anything obviously that enhances the safety is a good thing. Safety is one of the criterias one of the criteria categories that we look at when we're reviewing and scoring.
All right. Next question is, does it help your application to show the level of non-eligible costs the LPA is funding?
It doesn't necessarily help your application, but we definitely want to see that. We want to see all the costs involved in the project.
Okay. Is the conversion of a regional trail section with an aggregate surface that frequently floods washes out with an asphalt surface an eligible project?
Yes.
Enhancement.
Yep.
I like it.
And again, flooding, washing out, there's a safety issue there.
All right, another question here. In the 2024 guidelines compared to the 2022 guidelines, section B 3.2 under streetscapes, the
Wait,
text.
people are reading these guidelines.
Yeah.
I love this.
So they say the text changed from, quote, they are eligible if they are being done in conjunction with a federal aid funded highway road improvement, versus in 2022 it says they are eligible projects may be done. This doesn't imply that ITEP streetscape projects must be done with an FAU roadway project, does it?
Doesn't imply that ITEP streetscape. That's right. Yes. Yeah. If they're being done, may be done. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, okay. I think what we changed that to mean was it does not have to be in conjunction with a roadway improvement project. So, yeah, what Brandon is saying is correct. This does not imply that they must be done. Right.
Okay. All right.
To clarify the answer to the phase one sunset question, does project completion mean design approval? Is that the?
Yes.
All right. Are intersection bump outs to reduce pedestrian crossing distances and related ADA enhancements eligible?
They are.
What are the requirements again for communities within an MPO?
If you're within an MPO, what you should be doing is making sure that your MPO is aware of the project and the application that you're making. And then if you are awarded, that project needs to be included in your MPO's tip.
And do communities want a higher or lower community score out of 100?
Higher.
Yes.
The higher the score, the better chance that we will help you with your local match.
And then final question from an attendee. Please define exactly when funds are obligated.
That you will need to discuss with your IDOT local roads, district local roads staff.
All right, so I think we went through all of the Q&A. I'm just looking in the chat to see if there were, it looks like a lot of people moved their chat questions to the Q&A box. I see one, someone asked, is rehab of a building to be used as a trailhead facility eligible?
That would not be eligible, but you may want to look if it could possibly fit into historic preservation category, which is pretty kind of hard to get into, but possibly if it has historical significance is the only way I would think that type of work could possibly fit.
Right. Yeah, so check out, I guess, the ITEP guidelines, and again, reaching out to IDOT staff can, help clarify some of these questions. So just wanted to pull up our last slide here with contact information. So feel free to reach out to us, check out those guidelines, check out the website, theactivetrans.org/ITEP. There's a robust FAQ there that we updated for this year based on past questions that might be helpful. And also, the next webinar is August 21st, Wednesday, again at 11:30 a.m. We'll be walking you through that ITEP application, going more into the scoring, which has definitely come up today, but we'll go into more details. And then John and Yulita will be back to answer questions that you might have. So come with questions. And yeah, I think are there some more questions? Oh, I think some more questions ended up in the Q&A, so we can go over those because we still have 10 minutes. But here, I'll read this first one. When ITEP funds are awarded, are they locked into the fiscal years and engineering phases that were requested in the application? Or is there flexibility to shift funds across fiscal years and phases if anticipated timing costs change subsequent to the award, as long as the funds are spent within the 4-year sunset periods?
They are locked until you ask us if you can move them. And then there is a possibility to transfer funds between phases, or even to possibly get a time extension. Time extensions we do not like to do necessarily, but the possibility is there. You can always ask.
Great. So it's all about communicating with IDOT staff.
It is. I mean, any questions you have about anything, honestly, we are here. Ask us. Our goal here is to give away money and to see some really good projects being built. So, we're here to help. So any questions you have, never hesitate to contact us.
Maybe one more bonus round question, and then we can let John off the hook. From Carrie, we're looking to connect a city park to an existing bike ped trailhead in the county. It would be mostly along a flood wall / levee and will require a bridge underpass. We only have 2 actual businesses that would not bump up directly to the path, but the path would go directly by our low-income housing. Would that count as connecting spaces?
Possibly. I mean, that connect a city park to, whoops, we lost it. Did it go away?
Oh, sorry. That's me. City park to an existing bike ped trailhead in the county.
And where does the bike ped trailhead? Yeah, it my initial question there, just in reading that, would be what is the transportation connection there?
Yeah. Does the bike ped trail go somewhere else? Maybe.
Right. Yeah. But that is one again. Shoot us a Google map image and show us what you're talking about, and we will help answer that question.
Great. A couple other quick questions. So someone was wondering about that community score interactive map and getting a link to it.
Right. The application portal will open on August 1st, I believe, at 8 o'clock in the morning. We have it set. And as soon as you get in there, that's where the community score map is. It is actually part of the application system. So August 1st, you can pop in there. That is the first thing you'll see. And quite honestly, I would recommend that that's the first thing you do to determine what your community score is going to be. Because that will give you, based on the previous slide that Maggie shared about community scores, that will give you an idea of what possible assistance you could get with your local match. So we would recommend that's the first thing you do.
Right. And I did see Yulita answered one question here, so I just want to read it in case anyone was curious. So for the LPA GATA exemption, does the LPA, the local public agency, still need to be registered on the GATA portal? And the answer is no, not need to be registered. And then final question here, should we contact John first or local roads with questions?
If it's a strictly an engineering question, absolutely go directly to your district local roads office and ask them, because I am not going to be able to help you with that. And if you have a question about the program, about the application, or anything like that, then you need to shoot an email to dot.itep@illinois.gov. You can shoot me one too, or you lead it, absolutely. But then our email boxes get really full real fast. So dot.itep is the best place to go.
And then another question just came in. We're getting some last minute questions in here. So when executing phase 1, what is the most important part to begin on?
I'm not sure I understand, Lee, what the question is. I'm not sure how to answer that.
If you have any more details to share, Lee, feel free to add those. Right. So I think, oh wait, one more question here. Is the
Oh.
ESR the most important?
There you go, Steve Letsky. Thank you for engineering phase one consult with IDOT local roads. I don't know that ESR is the most important. It may be. It may be. It kind of depends on the project and the district local roads people, because you'll work with them to get that stuff going. But ESR, it can be, depending on the project, it can be a lengthy process.
What does ESR stand for?
That is the environmental something report.
Okay.
It's the ESR. You know, you get so
Yeah.
accustomed to the acronyms, you forget what they actually
I
stand for.
know. Sometimes it's like, what does ITEP stand for again?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Environmental survey request.
Survey request. There
Right,
we go.
thank you. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up. So thank you all for being here today, and good luck with your ITEP applications. And thank you, John and Yulita, IDOT staff, for joining as well. And yeah, we're excited to see what kind of projects you all submit this year. So good luck. And again, feel free to reach out. We'll be sending the webinar link, the slides, some other important links that were mentioned today to anyone who registered. So you'll get that. But yes, good luck again. So thanks again, everyone.